I've been with the Trust 8 years, similar time to Mark, and registered paramedic for the last 3. So in the 8 years that I've been with the Trust, I've merrily been jogging along, treating patients quite happily. You know, nothing's gone wrong, everything's been fine. And, you know, I always come to work and start my shifts and strive to do the best for my patients. You know, that is my biggest priority. I'm also a mentor, so obviously being, you know, respected by my students and being a good role model is also very important to me. And I've been fortunate enough, as lots of people have, to receive thank you letters for the care that I've provided. So when I came to work for a night shift one evening and got a tap on the shoulder saying, do you mind coming to the office? I'd like to just have a word about a patient you saw. It's like, your heart drops. It's like, oh my God, what's happened? What have I done? So obviously went into the office, Mr. Wrigley and Dave, and it was those 3 words: do you remember going to this patient? And handed me my PRF. Fortunately, it was fairly well completed. And immediately, yeah, definitely, I remember going to this gentleman. And I'll just briefly outline what the incident was. Basically, it was a day shift. We got called to a gentleman that had been out walking his dog in the park. The dog had basically pulled him over and he'd fallen to the ground. So obviously we arrived on scene. He was still on the ground in a supine position when we arrived. So took precautions. The dog was otherwise sort of being abused. Checked him over, checked his C-spine. He had no C-spine tenderness at all. Did a full assessment. He seemed a little bit confused at the time. He claimed that he'd been knocked out. In my mind, I was thinking, this is a low mechanism fall on grass. The likelihood of him having any C-spine injury is low. He's not complaining of any C-spine pain. Observations-wise, there was nothing extraordinary or fairly standard. The only other thing he was complaining of was some funny sensation in his left arm below the elbow. We established that he had arthritis as a pre-existing condition, and he had this sensation in the past. So it's like, that's not new, okay. We sat the gentleman up, he still felt okay, nothing changed, and we basically walked him to the ambulance. I did take him to hospital because, erring on the side of caution, although not cautious enough, I thought maybe this does need checking out. He couldn't really explain why he had this sensation, although he'd been told it was due to his pre-existing arthritis. So he didn't really have all the answers as to why he had these symptoms. So it's like, right, okay, let's take you to hospital and see what we can do. So we did. It was a busy day in A&E, and later on when we went back with the next patient, he was still sat on a trolley in the corridor. So obviously when I got the tap on the shoulder to explain what had happened with regard to this gentleman, that was the explanation that I gave. I was then informed that this gentleman had actually suffered a spinal compression and ended up staying in hospital for a couple of weeks. He subsequently was catheterised during his stay, and he had some residual weakness in his left side. So immediately it was like, oh my God, what have I done? I completely felt like I'd let this gentleman down. I was in complete shock. I was really angry with myself that I'd let this happen, that I hadn't picked up on this, and after 8 years of jogging along quite merrily, you get the impression you're infallible. You're not going to make a mistake. You hear of other people making mistakes. Like, oh, I'm not going to do that. I wouldn't do that. So it really did knock me for 6. And you know, like that gentleman on there said, you know, you beat yourself up, and it not only did it knock my confidence at work, it completely knocked me as a person at home. I wasn't the same person in my normal life, you know. I was quiet, I was withdrawn. You know, my husband was saying, you know, are you okay? What's wrong? Obviously, I talked to him about it. And I think one of the other biggest things was, what would my colleagues think of me? You know, they're going to think I'm a rubbish paramedic, you know. And I was really cautious about who I told about it. It was only really a couple of people I really trusted, that I knew wouldn't go spreading rumours, that I felt I could tell, because of fear of criticism, and everything that sort of comes with that, really fearful of what people might think. So from the initial meeting and obviously discussing the incident, I was then requested that I went away and did a reflective practice, which I did pretty quickly, within a few days, because I just felt that I had a black cloud hanging over me and I couldn't move on until I dealt with it. So I went away and did the reflective practice, and it was really beneficial. I felt it was a really good thing to do. It was a good experience. It certainly highlighted some things to me with regard to the incident, the pre-existing conditions the gentleman had, C-spine, you know, checking for C-spine problems, etc. So not only did it increase my awareness in all those areas, obviously what I learnt from that has now changed the way I think about those kinds of incidences, how I go about assessing those kinds of patients, and for me, I felt it was almost, you know, it sounds daft, but it was almost like a healing process that I went through, from initially finding out what had happened, learning from that and reflecting upon it, then enabled me to feel okay about moving on from it, and to basically accept, yes, I've made a mistake, and okay, I can't change that, but I can learn from it, and okay, I can now move on. And that's when I felt okay in my own mind to move on and actually gain my confidence back again. So once I'd accepted everything that had happened, obviously passed on my apologies to the gentleman and everything else, but I think what it basically boiled down to is, and this goes for everybody, honesty is paramount. Whether, like Mark said, he had that initial thought, I could get away with this. You know, obviously that wasn't the same for my circumstances. But, you know, there's no point in trying to cover anything up or hide or try and give excuses for things that have happened. Hold your hands up and just say, yeah, okay, I made a mistake, and be honest about it. And I think what I've learned from going through this whole process, and now we're going on forward with these forums, is that we all make mistakes. We're not infallible. We are only human at the end of the day. And, you know, prior to this, when you hear about other people making mistakes, you sort of think to yourself, oh, I wouldn't have done it like that. Even when you read the SI folder, you know, I wouldn't have done that, I would have done that differently. But would you? You know, you weren't the clinician there at that time. And you can become quite judgmental of people that make mistakes, and that's not right. That's wrong. And I've certainly learned through going through this myself not to be judgmental of other people that you hear about have made mistakes. To be supportive of those people, because it could just be you next time. And to be very open about things. And like Mark says, you know, standing up, when Dave asked me to stand up and talk about this at the clinical briefing, I spoke to my husband about it and said, what do I want to do that for? You know, he's like, what do you want to do that for? And I said, well, yeah, it'd be really easy to say, no, I can't do it. But then I thought, but if we all turn around and say, no, I can't do it, nothing's ever going to change, nothing's ever going to happen. So I thought, I will make myself do it. It was probably one of the scariest things I've ever done. But I will make myself do it because I want to make a change. You know, we shouldn't have this blame culture. We should feel okay to talk about things. And hopefully, by doing these on a regular basis, that will change things and change people's opinions.